My name is Jonathan, and I've never felt so angry before. The anger I'm feeling is really strong, and no one should have to go through it. I wanted to confront two people right away, but why am I so mad? Let me explain. It all started about 5 weeks ago when my wife started changing a lot. It was like she became a different person. She stopped being close to me, including in our physical relationship as husband and wife. This made me suspicious because I had a girlfriend before who cheated on me. That experience was really painful and it taught me a lot. I never told my current wife about it because I didn't think it would change anything. During the second week of noticing her changes, I decided to investigate further. I'm not someone who hires a private investigator or asks others for help. I like dealing with my problems myself. I followed her during her lunch break and saw her go to a motel room, which confirmed my suspicions of her cheating. Her job didn't require her to meet clients outside the office. She worked in record keeping, so there was no need for customer interactions. Finding out about her cheating hurt, but what hurt more were the insults and mistreatment I had already faced. The man she was meeting worked in a different department and was doing well in his career. After seeing them meet 3 times in 2 weeks, I decided to confront the situation directly. I didn't want to spend money confirming what I already knew, so I waited outside the door, knowing my wife was with another man inside. It was a critical moment. I had to confront them, gather proof, and given how I felt, I could even consider legal action for alienation of affection. Her employer might also face consequences for letting this happen. I thought the man she was seeing might soon lose his job. I needed photos as evidence and planned to serve divorce papers soon. I had already changed the locks at our house and sorted out our money and credit cards. I had been preparing for this for the past 2 weeks, and now it was time for the final steps. I can't predict Simone's reaction for sure. I think she might feel relieved instead of upset at first, but later on, guilt might hit her. My lawyer, who knows a lot about divorces, said her guilt would fade once she got her own lawyer. You might wonder, do I still love her? Right now, I really dislike her. But deep down, I'm struggling with the idea that she might still love me and that this was just a big mistake she made, something we could fix. But logically, I know that's not possible. I can't trust a wife who betrayed me like this. I don't have any trust left for her. The love I still have for her is having a hard time accepting how much she's changed so quickly. The motel manager gave me the room key along with $100, asking me not to damage anything. It was the price for getting the key. He seemed like a good person, and I knew it wasn't his fault that my wife and her lover chose this place for their meetings. He also mentioned how he saw some similarities between my situation and his ex-wife's. I used the key to quietly open the door and entered the room, leaving it slightly open. I had a digital camera that my wife had given me for my birthday 3 months ago, and I was thankful for it now. She was yelling at the guy to stop, and he was angry and trying to get up. I took more pictures, capturing them in a compromising position. Simone was crying and covering herself while he kept doing what he was doing. I secretly hoped he would make that choice, which made my next move feel natural. I am her soon-to-be ex-husband, I declared, and who's behind is getting kicked is up for debate. I don't think you're going to kick mine. I positioned myself as he approached, setting the camera down and turning slightly. I let him come up on my left side and released the camera. As he got closer, I swung my arm forcefully, connecting with his face. He lifted off the floor from the force of my anger, pain, and a hint of fear. After hitting him, I was worried I might lose control and hurt him more, which wasn't worth it. I checked his pulse and eased up when I found he was okay. Simone was talking, but I turned to face her. She fell silent, clearly afraid. It was clear she had never seen me like this before, and I must have seemed very different from the man she knew. I'm done with your cheating ways, I told her as she sat there, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't look at me, something I had noticed happening more often lately. But now she knew I knew about her affair. The game was over. I handed her the divorce papers and told her I was filing for divorce. I changed the locks on the house and set up a bank account for her share of everything. I walked out as she pleaded with me to stay and listen to her explanation. Please, Jonathan, let me explain, she begged, but I kept walking. I couldn't bear to look back at her. I was too upset. If I turned back, I might change my mind, and there were too many issues to reconsider what was now over. When I arrived home, I found the locksmith had finished changing all the locks and reprogrammed the garage door opener. I thanked him and gave him a tip. Sitting in the house that used to be our home, I thought about the years we spent together. I couldn't understand why Simone had changed or why she started seeing me differently. I couldn't find a reason for her actions. All I knew was that our relationship ended in just 5 weeks. The pain and words had changed me into someone else. Sadly, Simone seemed unaware of this change, just as I hadn't noticed the changes in her. The phone rang, and it was Simone's mom calling. She asked what was going on, saying Simone had come to her in tears, saying she had ruined our marriage. I told her I found Simone at a motel and served her with divorce papers. Doris was confused and asked why. I explained that it had to be this way, and I was sorry for the pain it caused. Tears ran down my face. I cared a lot for Simone's parents. They had been kind to me. Hearing Doris's pain affected me deeply, and I was glad we were talking on the phone, so they couldn't see me upset. Doris asked, "Can't you and Simone try to fix things?" I replied, "I don't think so, Doris. This is a big problem that changes everything." There was a sad silence as Doris tried to understand what I said. I felt sorry for her, especially because we had dinner with them just last night. Simone acted lovingly in front of them, which surprised me because we argued before we got there. On the way back, she was distant. But at her parents' house, we acted like everything was perfect. I didn't want Sam to see our problems, so I kept them hidden. Now I wondered if I should have warned them before taking this big step. Sam wasn't in good health because of his demanding jobs and history of smoking, which had affected him. Doris, on the other hand, was healthy but worried about Sam's health. I wished I had warned them about what was happening. A few days later, Simone's dad called me. He wanted to talk about Simone's troubled relationship. Simone's dad told me about a conversation she had with her mom. Her mom was upset and wanted to know all the details about why I served Simone with divorce papers. She asked why Simone was at the motel and who she was with. Simone explained that we were having problems because I was busy with work and it was affecting our relationship. She mentioned that I was working hard for a promotion, and at her job, there was an issue with some employee records discovered by Greg. It wasn't a big mistake, but it was a serious problem that could have hurt my chances for a promotion, a raise, and my career growth. Greg, who knew about this issue, used it to pressure me into meeting him for lunch. This led to us becoming closer for a short time to avoid the consequences of my mistake. I didn't like the situation, but I agreed partly because Jonathan and I weren't getting along well, and our closeness had decreased over the last 6 months. Meeting Greg also made me realize I felt like I was missing out on life experiences others were having. Our first meeting happened during lunch in Greg's office when everyone else had left. Greg had prepared for our lunch meeting with my favorite wine, cheese, and crackers. Our lunch breaks usually lasted an hour, and everyone else would go to nearby restaurants or street vendors. I often got food quickly from a street vendor and went to the park alone. That day, no one seemed to notice we were gone. I found Greg to be much nicer than I expected, considering how he had pressured me before. That first meeting felt like a relief. After that day, I found myself wanting Greg more, even though I knew it was wrong. Despite still loving my husband Jonathan, Greg made me feel like I was his possession or something special. With him, I could be a different person. During that lunch, I did things with Greg that I had never done with Jonathan. We just managed to finish before our colleagues returned, and I left his office feeling less angry than when it all started. Later that day, I couldn't stop thinking about Greg and wanting more. It surprised me how much I desired him. Greg felt the same way and approached me about continuing our affair. The next day, we did it again in his office. During our encounters, Greg started saying negative things about Jonathan. Over the next 2 weeks, this became a pattern. While we were together, Greg would make hurtful comments about Jonathan and even suggested that Jonathan might be cheating on me. I started to see things from Greg's point of view and began criticizing Jonathan to others. Except for you and Dad. I pretended to be a loving wife when you and Dad were around because I didn't want you to see the truth. By the time of the motel meeting, Jonathan and I were distant, and Greg and I had gone from having an affair to being in a full relationship. Greg thought using a motel would be safer for us to meet since his wife was getting suspicious, and he worried someone at work might have noticed us together. We never talked about leaving our spouses. We just met for physical satisfaction. I failed to see the love, respect, and understanding I had with Jonathan. Instead, I went for physical pleasure, lust, and Greg's dominating behavior. Jonathan always respected me and never did anything without my agreement. Greg, on the other hand, took what he wanted and controlled me without genuine love. His wife gave him the emotional support he needed, while I let my emotional connection with Jonathan fade for the excitement with Greg. Now I see that I made a huge mistake 10 weeks ago, and I can't undo it. When Jonathan walked in that day, I panicked and tried to hide from him and push Greg away. Jonathan's face showed a look I had never seen before, a look of a stranger. Jonathan took pictures of us, and Greg got off the bed, muttering something I couldn't hear. Jonathan calmly placed the camera on the table nearby. Then Greg started threatening Jonathan and moved toward him. Suddenly, Greg flew about 2 feet into the air and landed on his back. I couldn't look at Jonathan. I covered myself with a sheet, feeling scared, embarrassed, and ashamed. Jonathan called me a name and threw some papers onto the bed, talking about divorce. I was unsure if he would hurt me too. I felt scared, embarrassed, and filled with shame. Jonathan left and took the camera with him. I called out to him, but I don't remember what I said. It felt like whatever I said didn't matter. Later, I took a long shower without checking on Greg. I didn't care if he was okay or not. The motel manager came to check on the room and told me that Jonathan had bought a key from him. He looked at me with disapproval and shared that he had caught his wife with another man in a room like the one Jonathan had rented. That's why he gave Jonathan the key. He told me I had messed up badly. I didn't need him to tell me, I already knew. I had ruined the best thing I ever had because I got caught up in my affair and thought it was special. The next day at work, I found 3 men waiting in my office. The company president, the HR manager, and what looked like the company lawyer. They asked about how Greg and I got involved, and I told them everything honestly. I could see other colleagues looking at me strangely, and I thought I would be fired by the end of the day. But I was wrong. The HR rep confirmed that Greg had initially blackmailed me. I had to sign some papers about Greg and me. Before lunchtime, I was out of the office and on the street. They couldn't keep me employed, but because of the blackmail, they had to give me severance pay. That was the end of my job. Greg was escorted out of the building by security and handed over to the police. It turned out he had been involved in other illegal activities, which came to light during questioning. Greg was facing serious legal trouble. I later found out that Greg had been stealing from the company in various ways, like fudging receipts from business trips. It added up to enough for grand larceny charges. His wife left him, taking their kids back to her parents' home. At first, they wanted me to testify, but after talking to the district attorney, they realized my testimony might not help. So they decided not to use me as a witness. Greg's lawyer asked if I'd testify for him. But when I explained how Greg pressured me into our relationship and caused issues in my marriage, even his lawyer saw that my testimony wouldn't help Greg. "Mom, I can't believe I made such awful choices," Simone confessed. Her mother's response was stern. "Simone, what you've done is one of the worst mistakes anyone can make. You've not just let down your parents and yourself, but you've also betrayed your husband. You've destroyed 2 marriages and broken your husband's heart. Your actions have hit rock bottom." Simone's mother expressed her continued love for her daughter, but admitted that she had lost all respect for her. Sam, Simone's father, told me that Doris and he had allowed Simone to move in with them. He sounded devastated, which made me feel sad too. They were good people, and I regretted that they were pulled into this situation. An update. I realized that if I had warned Simone's parents, she might have been alerted, and I wouldn't have needed the pictures. I only needed them for potential legal confrontations. In case of any disputes, the pictures would be backed up by testimonies from 6 different people who were involved. It's hard to label Simone's involvement as an affair because it's unclear if she was truly in love or if there were other factors at play, like pressure from Greg at the start. Meanwhile, my lawyer was aggressively pursuing the case against Simone's employer, which we had already filed. While I was getting ready to visit the motel, he took the case to court and quickly got on the phone with the company's lawyers, who were upset. Initially, they were in denial, but after hearing about the sworn statements, they changed their tune. Based on what my lawyer said, it seemed likely that Simone, Greg, and possibly others involved would lose their jobs unless they had a good explanation for their actions. On my end, the case against Greg for alienation of affection looked strong, especially with the sworn statements from coworkers detailing their secret activities at work. It's surprising that despite some supervisors suspecting Simone and her partner, no one spoke up or informed you about it. We had solid evidence for the court, including affidavits from the motel owner and a cleaning lady, totaling 6 witnesses. My pictures further confirmed the affair, especially since it happened during work hours. Greg was smart to use the motel to avoid suspicion at work, knowing the company's strict policies on relationships and ethics. Simone had been with the other man for about 5 weeks before I caught wind of it, and the affair had been ongoing for a total of 10 weeks when I confronted them at the motel. Finding out about the affair 5 weeks earlier was one of the hardest moments of my life. I had faced 3 of those moments by then, and I hoped I wouldn't have to go through another like them ever again. Leaving the motel that day left me feeling more numb than ever. Simone was still in tears on the bed, and Greg was unconscious. The motel manager met me in the hallway and I returned the key. He offered some comforting words and put his hand on my shoulder, saying, "It's tough now, but things will get better. Move forward, rediscover yourself, and eventually find someone else. You'll be okay." "Thank you. I've already started thinking along those lines," I replied. It's been smooth sailing since Simone didn't contest the divorce. Surprisingly, both lawyers were taken aback by her lack of resistance. While she appeared resigned and visibly upset, at least she didn't try to justify her actions. With the divorce settled, the case against her former employer also closed. They were eager to make me disappear, covering my legal fees, court expenses, and offering a substantial sum. Since then, Simone has faced hardships. She's alone, without a job, and living with parents deeply affected by her choices, adding to her stress. The label of being a betrayer still hangs over her, and it'll take time to shed that image. However, she has a chance for a fresh start. I hope she can move forward and not let this pain consume her. Maybe she's learned a tough lesson, and only time will tell. Greg ended up in jail, and I felt satisfied about that. It's like he's getting a taste of his own medicine. I don't feel sorry for him at all. To me, he's not worth anything. He had a family with a wife and 3 kids. I met her once during the divorce mess, and she was pretty. What a foolish choice Greg made. He had everything, but he threw it away for some temporary excitement. I decided to quit my job, which surprised my bosses. They tried hard to make me stay, but my personal problems were too much to handle while working. They gave me a good recommendation letter, though, which I appreciated. I found a new job on the West Coast and moved there about a year ago. I met a great woman who's a keeper. Trust is still tough for me, but she understands because she also went through a cheating ex-husband. I'm a 33-year-old woman who met my 36-year-old husband on a dating site. I didn't expect much because my past experiences on the site were disappointing, mostly leading to short flings based only on looks. But with my husband, things were different. He had long-term plans and goals. As we talked more, I realized we had similar goals, like coming from small families. He has 1 brother, and I'm an only child. This shared background made us want a big family for our kids to have lots of support. We went on many dates, talked a lot, and I felt happy and safe with him. I stopped using the dating site and cut off contact with others because I felt content and like a better version of myself with him. I was always encouraged to improve by my husband. When he proposed, I was excited, but as the wedding approached, I started feeling more nervous and unsure about marriage. Some close friends said I was too young, and I might be missing out on my youth. My mom reassured me that feeling nervous was normal, and that my husband was a good person who would take care of me. This made me feel pressured and confused, so I reconnected with someone from the dating site I had a fling with before. We met up, and things got passionate again. I never talked to my husband about my doubts. Instead, I kept seeing the guy from the dating site secretly. Even on our wedding day, I found out I was pregnant, and we were happy about it. Now, our child is 10 years old. My husband was deeply involved in our son's life, which made me feel left out at times. I thought it might be because of postpartum feelings, but instead of talking to a professional or my husband, I turned to the person from the dating site for comfort, and we started our affair again. In the following years, we had 2 more sons, now 6 and 3 years old. Our family brought us a lot of joy, and we were happy about reaching our goal of having a big family. The only thing we felt was missing was a baby girl. Since there were no girls in my husband's family and I had no sisters, having a daughter or 2 would make our family complete. My husband really wanted a daughter, but I wasn't getting pregnant. As time passed, it became frustrating, and being close felt more like a duty than something fun. It got stressful, especially after my affair partner had to move away for a new job. After trying to get pregnant for nearly a year with no success, we decided to see a doctor for help. They did tests and found out I was healthy and able to have children, but my husband couldn't father children. This news made me worry that our kids might not be his biologically. My husband didn't say anything right away. The drive home was quiet, and when we got back, he didn't talk to me about it. Instead, he called my mom to come and take care of the kids. Once the other people left, he talked to me about who the real dad of our kids is. I tried to calm him down by saying that even though he didn't father them biologically, he's still their dad because he's raised them. I honestly didn't know they weren't his kids. I promised I wouldn't make him raise kids that weren't his own. But he got really mad and we started arguing. He said I broke his trust and put his health at risk, suggesting I cheated on him. I got mad too and admitted to the affair. I explained it was a way for me to deal with feeling stuck and suffocated in our relationship, giving me some feeling of life and control. I know other women have felt this way too. My husband seems like he wants to end our marriage and find out if our kids are really his. But I don't want to break up our happy family. If I had known my husband couldn't have kids, I wouldn't have kept seeing someone else. I feel like I've made a huge mess of everything, not just my life but my kids' lives too, by trying to have another baby. I know I messed up, but my kids didn't do anything wrong. They deserve a family, and they deserve a dad. I married my husband because I truly loved him, not just for the security he gave me. The other guy was the only other person I was with, because I thought having multiple partners would be complicated. I didn't love him like I loved my husband. It was just physical. He knew I was married, and we set clear limits. We didn't want anything more than that from each other. I never even thought that someone else could be the father of my kids, because we always used protection, and I always saw my husband as their dad. My husband is going ahead with a divorce, and it's already happening. Sadly, he doesn't want to hear me out. When I mentioned how this would affect the kids, he'd insisted on having custody too. He said he'd been financially supporting 3 kids who aren't biologically his, and since he'll probably have to pay child support, he wants to make sure he gets something out of it, like a retirement plan. This really hurt me and I cried, but he didn't seem to care. My friends say this is what happens when you don't listen to them and spend your younger years with just one person. I know I hurt him and I'm sorry for that, but him wanting to take my kids away is too much. I still love him, and him trying to take my kids is worse than anything I did. Things have gotten really bad, and it feels like we're at a point where we can't fix things. At first, we wanted to sort out our divorce without going to court, but he won't agree to give me any financial support and he keeps putting me down whenever we're together. He says he won't pay because I'm the one who broke our marriage vows, and he doesn't think our boys should be around someone he sees as unfaithful. But they're my boys, not just his. He's trying to take them away from me, and he's even turned our oldest son against me. Now my oldest treats me with disrespect like never before. We weren't super close before, but he always knew I was his mom. But now he wants to live with his dad, and when the judge said I should have full custody because I'm their biological mom, and they aren't biologically connected to their dad, he got really upset. I think my ex-husband has been talking bad about me to him. My life feels like it's falling apart, and I'm always stressed and frustrated. This subreddit is the only place where I feel like people treat me like a person. I haven't gotten any money from him yet, and my son keeps acting out, wanting to be with his dad. I don't know what to do anymore. I managed to keep the house for the sake of the kids, but it's getting harder to pay for everything since I don't have the income of 2 people anymore. I asked for child support because he's the one who raised them, the only dad they know. At first he agreed, but now he's going back to court for custody. I've told him I can't afford another legal fight. I feel like I'm failing, having to rely on him again. And at the same time, I miss what we used to have.